All the Old Testament prophets, they would point to someone outside of themselves, but Jesus is standing there and he's pointing to himself. And he's saying, I am the one that the Old Testament speaks of in your midst.
This was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Living truth.
This is Living Truth.
Happy Easter Sunday and welcome to Living Truth. Wherever you're joining us from, we're so glad you're here to join us as we celebrate Jesus, our risen King, together. He's the reason for our hope, and through his amazing love, we are saved. As we give thanks in our worship, we'll be walking through some of Jesus' last moments before the cross in John chapter 18. Here's Pastor Brett with today's message: politicians, priests, and truth.
I find the Gospel of John so fascinating because he devotes about a third of his Gospel, 33% of his Gospel, to the last 20 hours of Jesus' life before the crucifixion. And what I want to do this morning is look at Jesus' last moments before the cross when he was on trial before Pilate, and explore how the politicians of his day and the priests of his day interacted with the truth statements that Jesus made, because that is eventually why he was crucified, because of the truth that he claimed. When you look at these two chapters, you see these three kingdoms, these three realities at play. During the New Testament times, the Romans had invaded the nation of Israel. They were a dominated people group. And so the religious leaders, the priests, had determined that Jesus needed to die, but they had no legislative right to do so because the Romans wouldn't permit anyone to carry out an execution. And so the priests come to Pilate, who is the Roman governor, and they hatch a plan to get Jesus convicted so that he can be crucified. Now, Rome was like any other political kingdom. Like every other kingdom of man that has come and gone, its primary interest was power. It ruled and took what it wanted. It was interested in others following its leadership, and anyone who threatened their rule of law was dealt with severely. And Pilate is simply a political leader. He is the governor of Judea. He is to represent Caesar's interests in that region of the world, and he is simply interested in political truth. Are you a threat to the state? Yes or no? Because the political climate of the New Testament was volatile. There was always uprisings. And everybody has descended upon Jerusalem for the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. So all of the citizens are arriving, and Pilate is under a lot of pressure. And the priests bring Jesus before Pilate because of a theological dispute. They don't like what Jesus has been teaching and saying. The religious leaders want to kill Jesus, but they're not permitted to, so they use a political argument. They use political power to carry out their desires. Pilate has spoken with the religious leaders, and he's trying to ascertain if Jesus is a king. He asks him, "What is it you have done?" Jesus speaks of his kingdom, and then Pilate latches onto that in verse 37. "You are a king then." And Jesus' reply to Pilate's inquiry is loaded with theological implications, because look at how Jesus answers Pilate. "You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And Pilate's approaching this whole trial politically, but Jesus answers him theologically. Jesus has just made a mic drop statement. I mean, he has just dropped the mic of all mics. He's just gone boom. He's saying, I have been born, I have come into this world to testify to the truth. And in fact, everyone on the side of truth listens to me. It is a loaded response that Jesus has just given him. But it begs the question, what truth is Jesus on trial for? What truth did Jesus claim? There is a body of evidence that has come before chapters 18 and 19 in John's gospel, and we have to inspect that evidence to determine why the religious priests are so upset with Jesus. In order to understand the trial before Pilate, we need to revisit some of the things that Jesus has said prior to chapters 18 and 19. And when you study the Gospels, not just John's Gospel, but all the Gospels, you see Jesus constantly coming into conflict with the religious leaders, the priests, the temple elite in his day. And along comes this Jesus in the New Testament, who is a carpenter by trade, so he didn't make it to the best of the best of the best school. He's a carpenter by trade from a low-income family in the town of Nazareth. Nothing good can come from there, according to the New Testament. And who is following this Jesus? Tax collectors, sinners, people that we put out of synagogue, the disreputable of society. These are the ones who are following him. And Jesus, when you study the Gospels, is creating all kinds of turmoil in New Testament Israel. God is doing extraordinary miracles through him, but he is saying things that threaten the theology of the religious leaders. In the New Testament alone, in the Gospel of John, the Greek word for I am is ego eimi. And in the Gospel of John, 24 times that statement is recorded. And I just want to look at a few of those statements that Jesus made so that we can rightly understand the truth that he is claiming in chapter 18. So when you study the Old Testament, let's pretend that we're all priests and religious leaders. You see a progressive theology in the Old Testament where God declares that he is the shepherd of his people Israel. Passages like Isaiah 40, verse 11, like a shepherd, he will tend his flock. Psalm 23, a famous passage, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. Psalm 80, verse 1, hear us, O shepherd of Israel, you who lead Joseph like a flock, you who sit enthroned between the cherubim, shine forth. In Psalm 78, it says, he brought his people out like a flock. He led them like sheep through the desert when speaking of the Exodus. Now, the cherry on the cake of God being the shepherd theology is found in Ezekiel 34. God denounces the bad shepherds, and then he speaks this, God himself. For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered. So this is an Old Testament theology that all the priests and experts in the law would have been thoroughly trained in. And along comes this Jesus in the New Testament, this carpenter by trade, and just outside of Jerusalem, near the pool of Siloam, Jesus in John chapter 9 encounters a man blind from birth. And when Jesus sees him, he has compassion on him, and this is what Jesus does. I mean, I love the humor of the New Testament. John chapter 9, Jesus sees this man blind from birth, and he looks at him, and he and his disciples have a talk about the blind man, and then Jesus starts to clear his throat. And as he's clearing his throat, and then Jesus spits onto the ground. This is in John chapter 9. Jesus makes some mud out of the spit. I mean, that's a lot of spit. And then he rubs it in the blind man's face, in his eyes. And he says to him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. This spit-covered, mud-covered blind man goes to the pool of Siloam, takes Jesus at his word, washes, and he can see. It's a miracle. God has healed this man of his blindness. Now, this took place on the Sabbath. And this blind man is brought before the religious leaders, and they start to question him because this miracle took place on the Sabbath. And according to their theological understanding of the Sabbath, miracles shouldn't take place on the seventh day. And then they discover that it was this man, Jesus, who had made this man able to see on the Sabbath. And the next chapter, while Jesus is talking to these leaders, he has the audacity to utter these words mid-discourse. In John chapter 10, verse 11, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Ego, eimi, the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Whoa! You're not surprised enough. That shows me that you're not experts in the law. This is a theologically loaded statement. Jesus has just said that he is the good shepherd. What Jesus is doing is standing in Jerusalem. He's talking to the religious leaders, and he is making an absolute monotheistic statement. A truth claim that only God could make because God is the shepherd of his people. But Jesus is speaking definitively that he is the good shepherd. What Jesus is saying is what Ezekiel the prophet looked forward to see in chapter 34. I am that good shepherd. I am who he was talking about. All the Old Testament prophets, they would point to someone outside of themselves, but Jesus is standing there and he's pointing to himself. And he's saying, I am the one that the Old Testament speaks of in your midst. And what do the religious leaders see? He healed someone on the Sabbath. See, you have to understand, they had so studied Old Testament theology, they had so memorized the verses, and this is the danger for each and every one of us. We can be educated, we can memorize lots of scriptures and create a theological construct. And the danger is when we do that, sometimes we're attempting to describe what is indescribable. We're trying to describe God, and we think that we can have him contained within our theology. Hence the game Jenga. This is the most frustrating game for anybody with shaky hands. But I'm using it as an illustration, and what I want to display is this. This represents the theological construct of the experts in the law. They had taken all kinds of verses and interpretations and created a system of organized thought known as their theology. And Jesus comes along, this carpenter who's followed by this ragtag group of disciples. He's doing extraordinary miracles, but then he says things like, I am the good shepherd that Ezekiel foresaw. And what Jesus is doing when he does that is he's coming up to their theology. Oh boy. I hate this game. He's coming up to their theology, and he's taking certain aspects of what they believe, and he's just pushing on it. And it's frustrating them. Because you look at John chapter 10, where he has just declared right outside Jerusalem, I am the good shepherd. By the end of chapter 10, they think he's raving mad and demon-possessed, and they're ready to kill him. Look at John chapter 10, verse 19. At these words, the Jews again were divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why even listen to him? Because they knew exactly what he was claiming. In John 10:31, the Jews picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus said to them, I have shown you many great miracles from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We are not stoning you for any of these, replied the Jews, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. They know exactly what he's saying when he says, I am the good shepherd. That's why they're so mad. Jesus has just messed with their theological construct. He's doing unorthodox things, breaking their traditions. Let's look at one other example. The priests and the experts in the law would have studied the Old Testament, and a truth emerges as you study the Old Testament that God alone has the power of life and death. Let's just look at a few verses. Psalm 68, verse 20. Our God is a God who saves. From the sovereign Lord comes escape from death. So our life is in his hands. Psalm 56:13, for you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. 1 Samuel 2, verse 6, the Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. Now, just in case that's not clear enough, the priests and the experts in the law would have known Deuteronomy 32, verse 39. Look at what God says there. He wants to make it abundantly clear. See now that I am he, Anihu, and there is no God besides me. It is I who put to death and give life. I have wounded, and it is I who heal, and there is no one who can deliver from my hand. That's a pretty definitive statement by God in Deuteronomy chapter 32, is it not? God is making an absolute monotheistic statement. I am. There is no God besides me. I put to death. I give life. There is no one who can deliver from my hand. And along comes Jesus in the New Testament. One of his friends named Lazarus has died and he's been buried for 4 days. And Jesus shows up on the scene. And Lazarus' sister Martha comes running out to him. And she says, if you had been here, he would not have died. And Jesus, standing just again out not far from Jerusalem, says these words. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live even if he dies. What? Again, Jesus is making an absolute monotheistic statement. Jesus is speaking heresy according to their traditions. Jesus is completely messing with their theology. Like if the Good Shepherd wasn't bad enough, he's just claimed that he is the one who controls life and death. He is the resurrection and the life? What? Nobody's as shocked as me. Now, if I said to you, I am the resurrection and the life, and walked to where the dead body was and said, rolled away the gravestone and said, Lazarus, come out, and nothing happened, you'd be like, this guy's a phony. Jesus walks over to the grave. He has them roll away the stone. They ask him not to because the smell would be so bad. And Jesus says, roll away the stone. And then he says, Lazarus, come out. Why? Because he is the resurrection and the life. He is the God of Deuteronomy 32, verse 39. I am, there is no God besides me. I put to death, I give life. There is no one who can deliver from my hand. Yet Jesus just raised him from the dead. Do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who he is? And look at the reaction of the priests. They have just seen a dead man raised from the grave, and look at what they do. We read in verse 47 of John 11, then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin, the ones who have just brought Jesus before Pilate. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. They know exactly what Jesus is claiming. Jesus was constantly making truth claims throughout the Gospels that were challenging their theology and turning their interpretations upside down. And instead of believing him, instead of believing the evidence of Lazarus raised right in front of them, they rejected his claims. Do you see what Jesus is doing to their theology? Jesus is saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the one that the scriptures talk about. I am the one that the Old Testament points to. I am everything you need for salvation. I am God among you. Before Abraham was born, I am. And guys, just in case you're not getting it, I'm going to keep deconstructing your theology. And you know what? You think you have understood me. But I am far greater than you can even imagine. What I find so intriguing about John chapter 18 and 19 is that the priests and the politicians have the truth standing right in front of them. Not just the truth of who God is, but in fact, the truth that created everything, that brought everything into existence. The truth of gravity, the truth of why the sun exists, the truth of the cosmos, the truth about everything. And the politicians and the priests think that they are the ones in control. Pilate says to Jesus, "Don't you know I have authority to kill you?" Do you know who you're talking to? The one who even gave you the breath to exist is standing before you, and you have the audacity to think that you have authority over the one who's sustaining you to even say those words. Do we know who he is? The priests know exactly what Jesus is claiming because he's dismantled their theology. And Jesus, during his trial, says, "Everyone on the side of truth listens to me because I am the truth." And Jesus looks at us today, and his words to Pilate are just as real today as they were on the day of his trial when he spoke them. And he says to you today, are you wandering aimlessly? I am the good shepherd. Are you struggling in the dark? I am the light of the world. Are you hungry for more? I am the bread you are seeking. Are you looking for heaven? I am the door. Are you seeking truth? I am the truth. Are you looking for eternity? I am the resurrection and life. And because of who he is, when we place our faith in what he has done for us, we can rest assured that the great I am watches over us. Amen? The Christian life is not about who we are. It's not about what we do. It is all about who he is and what he has done. Jesus was so convinced of the truth that his death, burial, and resurrection was the means by which we would be reconciled to God that he willingly laid down his life because of it. Because no one's in control at that trial except for Christ himself. Politicians are grasping for power. The priests are worried about their theology, and the truth is standing in their midst. And he dies for both of them. And the resurrection is the ultimate proof of his truth claims, because you cannot kill the resurrection and the life. Pilate and the Roman soldiers ridiculed the truth. And sadly, many people today do the same thing. The priests knew full well what Jesus was claiming, and they just flat out rejected the truth, as many people do today. But those who acknowledge their need of salvation receive the truth, as many people do today. And so the question now becomes for each one of us in this room, what do you do with the truth? What do you do with this Jesus who says, all that you need, I am?
Join us next week for a new series from Brett McBride. This is Living Truth.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Sing praise the Father. And praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. O God of glory, majesty, praise Father. Heaven held its breath till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb that conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. Come on. And the church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. Now the gospel's truth of old shall not anew, shall not fade. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Yes. We sing praise and praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. Oh God of glory, majesty, raised forever to the King of Kings. We sing praise forever to the King of Kings. Yes, we worship you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Yes, Lord. Grace, amazing grace, it washes over, it washes over every dark and hidden place, and I am clean. It's so amazing. 'Cause I was owned, a slave to sin, yes. I thought I would never see a ray of hope, a chance to live, yes. But then you came to me. Grace, amazing grace, is mine forever. You're mine forever, until the day I see your face. I live in awe. It's so amazing, Jesus, you are so amazing.